Anjanath is often mistakenly referred to by Monster Hunter fans as just a T-Rex with not that many differences from its real-life inspiration. But what if I told you that this is one of the most unique fictional dinosaurs ever? Anjanath is not only crafted from some of the finest drops of tyrannosaurid paleontology, but also from a lot of rare paleontological gems across a lot of different dinosaurs. And it even has a sprinkle of some material from non-dinosaur biology. Do you want to know what science is required to forge such an iconic dinosaur? I'm Reisuka, the cosplaying paleontologist, and today I'm going to show you how to upgrade one of nature's most iconic designs. Be sure to hammer that like and subscribe button if you want to see more content that talks about how your favorite media can teach you more about real-life dinosaurs. Now, the Tyrannosaur strategy is like a great sword build with weakness exploit level 3. It delivers a single strong blow where it hurts the most. Tyrannosaurus rex had the most powerful bite force of any living land animal, reaching over 54,000 newtons on its front teeth. Just so you know how strong this is, jaguars, which are the felines with the strongest bite force comparable to their size, can only apply up to 2,813 newtons on their carnassial teeth. That's about 23 times weaker than the bite force of a T-Rex. Not very impressive, huh? Jaguars are the only felines that don't cart their prey by puncturing fleshy throats. Instead, this juiced up Nargacuga destroys the brain of their prey by biting through their skull. I don't think even a mega potion can heal this taper. Now remember that the pressure from the bite force of a T-Rex was 23 times greater than that of a jaguar. So add max part breaker onto their build. This bite strength allowed T-Rex to bite and even pulverize bones with just one chomp. So they eat bones alongside their meat, which is known as osteophagy. We have direct evidence of this as we found fossilized T-Rex poop, which is technically called a coprolite. And it had a lot of bones in it. Osteophagy is somewhat uncommon because bones are really hard to break. Only scavengers like hyenas and vultures really tend to eat bones, but they still never do it to the extreme of a T-Rex diet. And this is the first paleontological material we are going to use to craft Anjanath. Now, Anjanath's title is the Fierce Jaw Wyvern, since it has the ginormous jaws of T-Rex that are about the same size as your hunter. Just like the real dinosaur, Anjanath has a very wide cheek to accommodate huge neck and jaw muscles that give its bite force that strength. But somehow, this jaw still isn't big enough for them, and they have a structure in their chin that makes it look like they have an even bigger jaw and bigger teeth than they actually have. But when you look closely, you can see that their teeth are set further back in their mouth, so this big chin could be something that's more like a horn-like structure instead of teeth. Usually, when animals have a structure that really serves no other function than to make the animal look bigger, biologists jump to a conclusion faster than a hammer can maim to the head of a monster. And they say, it's a display structure. For example, animals like deer grow horns that indicate their level of health to a potential mate, and they can also use these horns to fight against competition or predators, or just intimidate both of those with the sheer size of their horn. If you can intimidate a predator or your competition, you're spending less energy and putting yourself in less danger, which means you're more likely to survive and evolve. So this structure in Anjanath means that size does matter when we're talking about jaws. But if we're talking about anything else, all sizes are great. So when Anjanath is dedicating all of its resources to producing these large bony horns on its jaw, this shows that when the females choose the males, the Anjanaths with the larger jaws tend to be heavily favored. But just like switch axes, structures can have more than one use. You can say that again. Remember that I told you that deer use their horns to fight and intimidate? It's a known behavior of tyrannosaurs that adults often fought by biting each other's faces. Now we know this because we found a lot of bite marks on their skull, especially in their lower jaw. Do you see where I'm going with this? If Anjanath fights other members of its species for mates and territory, horns that protect their chin and help to hurt others could be a literal lifesaver. And since they mimic giant teeth, from afar they could intimidate intimidate other Anjanath or even other predators, and that would save them from getting hurt in the first place. Intimidation seems to be the preferred tactic of Anjanath, as it not only uses its fake teeth to scare others, but they can expand their snout, raise the scales on their back, and spike up the feathers on their back to look massive. This dino is for sure capable of and willing to win most fights. But in nature, when animals can win a fight without that confrontation, they will prefer to do that. But like I said, even if it could win, the risk of deadly injuries makes natural selection really favor animals with a good display structure instead of animals that are just good at winning fights, even if they are perfect hunters. That's a good thing though. I mean, imagine if Anjanath was even better at carting noobs, huh? I wouldn't receive a single scale from fivers. Now, intimidation can go hand in hand with another strategy that Anjanath uses: territory marking. If Anjanath spends a lot of time and energy making others scared of it, marking his territory is a really effective way to reduce competition over food and resources. And Anjanath mostly does that not through vision, but by smell. Now, you may have seen dogs pissing over every pole or cats rubbing their cheeks all over your legs and furniture, and this is a common mammal behavior called scent marking. I'd like to leave my scent on you, hunter. Each animal has its own unique scent. So when cats are rubbing all over your leg, they're using a special scent gland to put their scent all over you. This is a way that your palico lets other palicos know that this hunter already has a companion. Now, Anjanath is not a mammal, but it's a theropod dinosaur, and we know that some of them use their sense of smell in very interesting ways. The living theropods, birds, use their smell to imprint mate, especially birds that only have one partner throughout their lifetime. But other than using it to recognize individuals and find food, we still lack the level of study that we need to really fully understand how birds use their sense of smell. Some birds use the scent of their nest to be able to find them, like the European storm petrels or Leach's storm petrel, but we don't really know whether they use scent to communicate a territory like mammals do. Now, we can't be sure if real living dinosaurs use their scent to mark their territory, but with Anjanath, it's pretty clear that that's what's happening. It's possible to see Anjanath rubbing its back along trees like a moose would do, and they also spray their flammable mucus on rocks. So just like a male cat in heat that's pissed all over the house, wherever Anjanath lives reeks of their smell, and this would turn away possible predators and competitors while also attracting mates. What makes this even more interesting is that T-Rex was likely the dinosaur that had the best sense of smell. In 2019, a study combined olfactory bulb size with genetics to see which dinosaurs and birds had the best sense of smell. Now, the olfactory bulb is the area of the brain and vertebrates that processes smell. Now, the olfactory bulb of T-Rex occupied 71% of its cerebral hemisphere. The cerebral hemisphere makes up the largest part of the brain, so that's a lot of sensors for smell. The study also found that T-Rex would have had between 620 to 645 genes that are associated with recognizing different smells. This means that T-Rex would have almost had the same number of smell receptors that house cats do, and they use smell for communication a lot. While this study was released after Monster Hunter World, T-Rex being a good sniffer has been a known fact for a while among paleontologists because of endocasts, which is the shape that a brain leaves behind in the skull of a dinosaur fossil. And endocasts were already showing that T-Rex had a large olfactory bulb for a long time. But the way that Monster Hunter cooked how a T-Rex would use its sense of smell is muscular chef dinner grade. Now, I've already talked a lot about how Anjanath uses their sense of smell to mark their territory, but not how they actually identify it. When an Anjanath goes to spit mucus on a rock, you can see it sniffing and popping out a weird structure from its snout. The game calls it a nose bone. But honestly, this is something that doesn't exist in real life. The shape of it kind of resembles the crest of a Dilophosaurus, which was used for thermoregulation and display to find a mate. Now, both seem like they could be a likely use for Anjanath, but I think that there's more to it than that. If you think about Dilophosaurus, you'll probably think about the scene where it spit poison onto Dennis Nedry in Jurassic Park. Since Anjanath also spits mucus out of its nostrils, this must be a Jurassic Park reference, because no sane paleontologist thinks that Dilophosaurus crests are for venom spitting. Another possible use is that this could be a very speculative and fantastical version of the Flehmen response. This is when mammals raise their lips when they're trying to identify an unusual smell. This makes the surface area of the mouth and nose area larger, so they can absorb more particles and refine their information about this unusual smell. smell. Now, Anjanath looks like he kind of lacks the muscles to be able to move his lips. So this could be a really strange way to kind of enlarge the airways and get more information about the smell in question. So Anjanath's sense of smell and features to enhance it are kind of exaggerations of how the real T-Rex would use them. But besides social signaling, Monster Hunter made Anjanath's sense of smell have another use that references a hypothesis about T-Rex that kind of leaves a giant gamut in the room. Remember that study I told you about that looks at dinosaur and bird smell capabilities? The bird that had the best sense of smell predicted by far was the turkey vulture. And Anjanath is clearly inspired by them. If we just look at the appearance of Anjanath alone, its feathers are the same color and in the same positions as those of a turkey vulture, with a bald head and black feathered body. Anjanath's skin color is pink not because of pigment, but because they have translucent skin. And yes, this was confirmed by Capcom. So the pinkish coloration actually comes from blood vessels that are sitting just below the skin. And again, that's the same reason why a turkey vulture has a sort of red to pinkish head. Now, this connection to the turkey vulture could be more than a stylistic choice, but instead, it's a hint that Anjanath is referring to one of the most controversial Tyrannosaurus rex hypotheses. Now, turkey vultures live off of dead carrion, which is also known as scavenging. Their powerful sense of smell can distinguish fresh meat from rotten meat, even when they're flying miles above it. And their sense of smell also allows them to find very well hidden bodies. Now, this controversial hypothesis that I talked about before is that T-Rex would also be a scavenger, and that it would use its great sense of smell to locate dead animals over a larger area instead of actively hunting its prey. This theory was made incredibly popular by people who love dinosaurs but who are not paleontologists, so it makes sense that Monster Hunter would try to reference it. But I have to say, the evidence for this has been thoroughly debunked, and I need to be serious for one moment. I need to be serious for one moment, and one moment only, to talk about how irresponsible the scientific community was for spreading this hypothesis. The first paleontologist to propose this was Jack Horner, the paleontologist that served as a scientific consultant for the first Jurassic Park movie. Now, before Jurassic Park, he was already a well-known paleontologist, but after the movie, his popularity skyrocketed, especially among people that were not involved in dinosaur research after he appeared in the biggest dinosaur franchise ever. By the way, Jurassic World, Jurassic Park, if you're watching, I'm available for consultation. Anyway, the popularity made Jack Horner kind of a media star in the early 2000s. So in documentaries for the Discovery Channel and in interviews and in lectures, he often talked about T-Rex being a scavenger because he believed that the dinosaur was unable to hunt. That's right, he said T-Rex was unable to hunt. Now let's make a very important distinction here. He talked about it. He did not research it or find evidence for it. And if he found evidence for it, he didn't publish it in a peer-reviewed journal, and therefore, it cannot be trusted by other scientists. To this day, he has never employed the scientific method to formally test this in any way, So basically, he just told the public who don't have degrees in paleontology his random opinion about T-Rex with no scientific evidence to back it up, and didn't even check the real data to see if what he was saying could be a mistake. And that's a big no-no. Now, the closest thing I could find to any reasoning behind this theory was in the book that he published in 1993 called The Complete T-Rex. But again, this is not a scientific publication. He just stated that in his opinion, he thought that T-Rex was too slow to chase prey. But there isn't any reference to a study that estimates their speed. He said that T-Rex wouldn't be a hunter because lions and tigers need their front limbs to hunt. But again, he didn't use any scientific testing to see if this is the only way that animals could have hunted. Not to mention that T-Rex had a whole array of sharp teeth, the strongest bite force of any carnivore in the world, and that there are other carnivorous theropods with tiny ass arms running around that could hunt, like Carnotaurus, for one example. Now, I could go on and on and on about every single argument he made, which are opinions, not scientific, and I could debunk all of his points by referencing scientific papers that used the actual scientific method to get their data, but that would really be a waste of time, and it's not the point of this argument. So this scavenger tyrannosaurus hypothesis was really born out of a paleontologist that was willing to compromise his ethics to get the attention of the public. And I think it's clear now more than ever that if you're a scientist and a public figure, you need to be responsible about the scientific information you're providing and not just you off your opinion as fact. Anyway, now you know that the T-Rex scavenging hypothesis is not a scientific hypothesis. It's an opinion! So back to Anjanath. Is it a scavenger like the vulture connection seems to imply? Well, kinda. Anjanath is pretty well established as a territorial and aggressive animal, but notice how much of his behaviors are based on intimidation. For you to picture its hunting habits, imagine a giant jawgrass hunting abnoths over the ancient forest. And Anjanath, with its sensitive nose, could sense the smell of blood and hormones associated with fear that was being exhaled from the abnoths from across the ancient forest. Anjanath knows that if it arrives on time, it can get an easy meal, so it would rush into that direction. Then he might find a great jawgrass with an abnoth in his stomach and a bunch of others escaping. If he manages to scare off the jawgrass with his display structures, the jawgrass would have to regurgitate the abnoth to be able to run. So then Anjanath could get an entire herbivorous dinosaur to eat without spending any energy to hunt it. Now, if the jawgrass is feeling confident enough to fight anyway, the Anjanath could then easily whoop their ass because 1, they're tired from hunting, and 2, they have an entire abnoth in their stomach weighing them down. This type of behavior is called opportunistic hunting, and it's the most accepted hypothesis for what the life of a T-Rex would have really been like if you're a paleontologist who's not Jack Horner. This is a lifestyle that's kind of in between scavengers that only eat dead animals and active hunters that have to go after prey all the time. We know that T-Rex actively hunted because we have fossil evidence of healed bite marks that were caused by tyrannosaurs, and that's something that could only occur if the animal was bitten while it was still alive. Of course, Anjanath's behavior is much more exaggerated than that of the real T-Rex, since its smell could help it to find wounded or dead animals. But I don't really think they would go into the middle of another carnivore's hunt and try to claim the prey as their own. Alright, I talked all about Anjanath, but there's one more thing you must be thinking. Why and how the heck does this dinosaur spit fire? In terms of video game design, I can't think of a reason not to give a cool dinosaur the fire-breathing ability, but when we look for a biological reason, it's kind of hard to find one. I think it's safe to say that Anjanath's mucus would have likely appeared without the ability to breathe fire, and it probably would serve to kind of fill in this dinosaur's social functions with the sense of smell that we talked about previously. Anjanath has jaws that are probably strong enough to cart any monster that it chomps on, so I don't really think the fire is super needed as a weapon. My first instinct as an evolutionary biologist is that it would be some sort of display structure, but they don't really seem to use it for intimidation, and it seems like it wouldn't really be relevant during mating. So my guess is the second favorite answer of biologists when we can't explain what a structure does, and that is that it's a vestigial structure. If you think about it, Anjanath has a lot of weird adaptations for an animal that lives in a tropical jungle. It's a huge animal that's covered in feathers. If you think about big mammals today, the only ones that have a full fur covering are the ones that live in polar regions like polar bears, whereas mammals that live in hotter regions like hippos and giraffes and even black bears have little to no hair, or at least hair that's thinner and not sitting on top of a big layer of fat. The reason for this is the bigger that an animal is, the surface area of their skin in comparison to the total volume of their body is lower, which makes it harder to transfer heat from their body into the ambient environment and therefore harder to thermoregulate in a tropical environment. So what if Anjanath is an animal that recently came from a cold region and now has vestiges of their previous lifestyle? We don't have to speculate if such a species could be possible in Monster Hunter, since in ice form they were introduced to the Fulgur Anjanath, which is a subspecies that lived in an icy climate. This would mean that Fulgur Anjanath could be the more basal species, meaning that it's more closely related to their common ancestor and more likely to retain the features of that common ancestor. And this would mean that base Anjanath is a derived species that's not as closely related to the common ancestor. Now, this means that the lush feathering and the thermoregulation features like the nose bone and the sail could come from vestigial adaptations to a cold climate. Basically, I'm saying that maybe the common ancestor of Anjanath had a sail and the nose bone, and while these were useful in cold climates, they're just kind of left over in base Anjanath because natural selection didn't happen to get rid of them yet. And retaining traits from a common ancestor is what we call having a plesiomorphic trait. So in this context, fire breathing being another form of thermoregulation makes much more sense. Now, Fulgur Anjanath also had the ability to generate electricity throughout its body. Now, base Anjanath seems to have lost most of this during its evolution, but then it seems like it conserved enough in its sinuses to be able to ignite its deadly snot. And that's all I have to say about Anjanath. What's incredible about this design is that even though it's very much a tyrannosaur after receiving all the buffs of a hunting horn, the fantastical properties of this monster either enhance the tyrannosaur-like properties with some mammal-like behaviors, or they fill in the gaps with fantastical monster hunter biology. Not only were the ingredients top-notch, but this was definitely done by a master forger. Like it follow for good drops on your next hunt.